This is the Israeli port of Ashdod, where the ships were brought to shore. Hundreds of activists were arrested. And these are the beaches of Gaza, where hope has now been replaced by anger, and a day of demonstration is planned. Israel now says 9 people were killed in the attack at sea. The protesters claim to have raised flags of surrender. And from around the world, widespread condemnation from both the public and politicians. The UN is in emergency session. Washington is deeply disturbed. Turkey's calling it murder by a state. The Palestinian president has called it massacre. Turkey, state-sponsored murder. A day after the Israeli raid on the Gaza aid flotilla, nearly 500 passengers remain locked up in an Israeli jail. At least 9 bodies are lying in a morgue. Dozens of activists are in hospital now. Over the course of our coverage, we're going to gauge reaction right across the globe, but we're going to start with 3 very key locations to where this story is developing. There is Turkey, where most of the dead are thought to have come from. Anita McNaught is there for us in Ankara. We're also going to be live to Gaza City. Nicole Johnston is there. That's where, of course, the aid, that's Ayman Mohideen, who's in Ashdod, actually. We'll be coming to him in a moment. In fact, let's go to Ayman right now. Ayman Mohideen, an update from you.
Well, Kamal, a short while ago, the Israeli Foreign Ministry confirmed that, in fact, all 535 or so passengers that were on board the Mavi Marmara have been offloaded into the detention center behind me, and each one of these members, if you will be presented with one of 2 options. One, they will either accept and agree to immediate deportation, at which point they will be then immediately sent to Ben Gurion Airport and deported back to their countries of origin. On the other hand, those that have not been identified and refuse deportation will be sent to a prison facility not too far away from where we are, where they will be arraigned and possibly investigated. The point of the process, as we understand, is to gather and ascertain as much information from those on board as to what happened. There is an interrogation process, we understand, that takes place with the Israeli security services who are overseeing this phase of the operation. It is important to emphasize, though, we are unable to access any of those people that are in that facility. We have not been able to hear their version of events or the conditions under which they were brought into the port here behind me in Ashdod. On some of the specifics, including some of the key individuals that were on that boat, including members of the Israeli Knesset, Palestinian members of the Israeli Knesset, as well as Sheikh Ra'ad Salah, a very prominent political and social activist, we understand that they have been taken off the ship. The Israeli member of the Knesset, under the legislative immunity that she is granted, has been released. However, Sheikh Ra'ad Salah has been arrested and was expected to appear in court later to face charges. So there are some specifics on the conditions of those that have been released. Those are mainly Israeli citizens. For all the other foreign nationals, it has been very difficult to get information about their conditions. We are hearing accounts from relatives who are seeking information on their missing relatives. Some of them have been injured, some of them are still unaccounted for. So still information trickling in on the conditions of these hundreds of activists that have been detained. Kamal.
Ayman, what else are the Israelis saying, the Israeli army as well? Because yesterday it seemed they were very keen to get the line out as much as possible with certainly the media where you are in Ashdod. Any further word from them?
Absolutely. It was a theme that we heard reiterated time and time again from Israeli officials, that those on board the ships were preparing, or at least had prepared for premeditated violence against the Israeli soldiers. We heard the phrase Al-Qaeda terrorists and sympathizers being thrown around from Israeli officials. They were very keen on trying to portray these officials as non-peaceful, violent activists who were not intending on any kind of goodwill humanitarian gesture. But the reality of it is that is exactly that, the Israeli version of events. We have been unable to get any information whatsoever from those on board. As we saw from our own producers and reporters, as the events were unfolding, there was a white flag that was raised, and some have even raised questions as to the video material that has been released by Israel. We saw some very strong language coming out from Israeli officials that there was live fire, live ammunition, but so far the only footage that has been released by the Israeli military has shown clubs, has shown slingshots and marbles. We have not seen any of the weapons that have been allegedly used against the Israeli soldiers. So certainly a lot of questions still remain about the conditions of the raid. In fact, some have even gone far as to suggest that the footage we have seen has not been in its entirety complete, and it has been just very selective. So there are still a great deal of questions that need to be answered.
Ayman, stick around. We're of course going to come back to you a lot throughout the day. I want to move down to Gaza City now, talk to Nicole Johnston. Nicole, after the obvious initial anger of the first 24 hours, now what in Gaza?
Now it's, I suppose, in some respects, more anger and more protests. Hamas has called on the people of Gaza to protest for a second day today. We're expecting hundreds of people to come down to the port because there were hundreds of people on Monday. University students, members of Hamas, members of Islamic Jihad, they held a number of rallies, and we're expecting more of the same in terms of rallies today. There's also expected to be some strikes across the Gaza Strip, and the rallies, of course, will not only be confined to Gaza this time, they'll also be Gaza City, that is, they'll be across the entire Strip in a number of different towns.
And the whole Strip presumably still completely locked down, no one's in or out through land crossings, not just sea crossings?
That's correct. I mean, it's a very important thing to remember when we're talking about the siege and the attempt to break the siege, the attempt by this flotilla to actually come into Gaza. You have to remember how difficult it is for anybody to get out. Now, some people are able to get out if they have a special medical condition or a special business permit, but the numbers are very, very few. Most people are living here and they can't get out. And part of the siege, as we know, entails the sea siege. The fishermen here, which is a huge industry in Gaza, they are only allowed 3 nautical miles offshore, which is a very limited area to fish in. So this is one of the industries that's really suffered, along with the people of Gaza, during this 3-year siege.
Nicole, thank you. Stay there for me as well. Of course, coming back to you off to Ankara now, and Anita McNaught, who was in Istanbul yesterday. Anita, what's happening in Ankara today?
Well, it's all about the political response today, Kamal. That's why we're here. And I'm standing just down the road from the Israeli embassy, which was the scene of very lively protests yesterday. You can see, I think, behind me possibly, the level of security provided by the Turkish police today. We are waiting for the Turkish Prime Minister to fly back in from his trip to South America, which he cut short. He issued a blistering statement yesterday, and I think you touched on that at the beginning of the program, Kamal, when you used the word state-sponsored terrorism. That is the words he used, and that is ringing in the ears of the Turkish public today. It's on the front page of just about every newspaper. It was very interesting watching him give that press conference yesterday, because the Turkish Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is a man of considerable and discernible passion. He has a short fuse. He's known to lose it from time to time. But yesterday, his reaction, for us who are watching it, was one of controlled fury. People who knew him well said they'd never seen him so controlled. That perhaps itself is an indication of how much anger there is here in Turkey. But he's due back. We're expecting a press conference sometime this morning, and then of course the issue moves to Parliament. This is going to be addressed. This whole incident is going to be addressed in the Turkish Parliament in some shape or form today. We're waiting to see how that rolls out. And I should emphasize, Kamal, one of the things that is driving the Turks absolutely furious this morning is the lack of information. They are almost certain that some of their country's nationals have been casualties of this Israeli action. They have still not been given the information as to how many, what form, and all the rest. So that is hugely fueling emotions here. The television has been running pictures of some of the Turks who were on board the Mavi Marmara. Of course, their families have heard nothing at all. And over in New York, we have the Turkish Foreign Minister, Ahmet Davutoglu, who made this statement, again using language that is uncharacteristically emotional for him.
Today we have observed through live coverage an act of barbarism, where provision of humanitarian aid has been punished through aggression in high seas, 72 miles from international seas. Today many humanitarian aid workers go back in body bags, and Israel has blood on its hands. This is not off the coast of Somalia or in the archipelagos of the Far East, where piracy is still a phenomenon. This is the Mediterranean, where such acts are not the norm. This is where we need common sense. This is where civilization has emerged and flourished. and where the Abrahamic religions took root.